Welcome to WBC Faster Together, the LinkedIn Live series of Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, Chief Operating Officer of WBC. And today we are joined by Velma Delaval, the Managing Partner of Vo Solutions, and Gina Papoose, the Chief Analytics Officer at Bristol Myers Squibb, both of whom are fantastic WBC champions. Welcome, Velma. Welcome, Gina.
Great to be here.
As you both know, WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 75 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders, building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We live our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, a diverse board of directors and advisory and leader councils, include more than 34% people of color. Please check the chat for our 9 action initiatives through which we aim to accelerate change, and join our movement at wbcollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showing the importance of cross-generational collaboration and the allyship of men in the movement. So today we want to talk about diversity in corporate tech positions. These are technology positions across industries and companies. Next week, WBC is releasing a new report, Women Corporate Tech Executives in America, outlining not only who holds positions like Chief Information Officer or Chief Technology Officer, but how we can ensure that these new and emerging positions are filled with skilled, diverse talent, and more specifically, women. So let's get started. Let's start with this report. We wrote this, as I just said, not only to showcase the women leading in C-suites across industries, but to discuss the pathways to tech leadership and the types of positions available. So why is this important and what's unique? Velma, let's start with you.
So thanks, Gwen. I think this report is really important because we don't just state the facts. And it's important because I think those facts really help us to understand what is the case for action? What do we need to do? What's really important about it is that we present a collective view from women. We offer women in tech, senior leaders, their perspectives on what those challenges mean, how they've become successful, and they offer some real insights and solutions that work. And so the report not only talks about the challenges, but it talks about the path forward. And there are some great examples and some great discussions on what's working and what people need to consider as they move forward. So I think it's some new insights that people really could benefit from when they're looking for, what do I do about these facts? Right.
And if I can add to that, Velma, I think it's also the most comprehensive view of the women executives across different areas within the technology space that at least I'm aware of. And it gives that baseline where we look across public and private sectors, companies of varying sizes, and we look at the breadth of this report in terms of types of roles that we cover. And that should really both raise the awareness as well as set up the foundation for what Velma, you're describing. So we actually attack this challenge from the facts.
That's right.
Well, and to get a little bit of context for the audience, right, to both things you said. So we worked with 15 corporate sponsors, right? So we worked with companies in this space like Deloitte, Cigna, and others that sort of have this data and have these positions. We also worked with 11 of our partner organizations that focus on women in technology. So this was a collaborative effort, and a collaborative effort, as you said, Gina, sort of collect this new data and really try to define this. And then the final piece, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, is we had insights from over 11 experts on what does this data mean? How do we want to get there? Why is this important? And then we did close-ups of women holding the roles, people like yourself, Gina, at this particular moment in time at Bristol Myers Squibb. So there's a lot in there. But let's start with kind of one of, as you said, just the facts, or the facts that we're pulling together. The report shows that women are 27% of CIO roles across industries. And this is the positions leading the way. This is where women are the most prevalent in this positions. but they're sort of less prevalent in sort of data science and analytic roles. Gina, tell us why that is, or give us the context to understanding the data.
So the data is a great asset in what's going to be shared, and the data drives some of the recommendations and implications that Velma highlighted. What the data tells us, and the great job this team did, and it was such a privilege to be part of it, is we've actually gone very wide and compiled information across, as you've mentioned, 11 different types of roles at the C-suite level, from CIO and CTO to chief digital officers to chief data analytics officers and chief data scientists, and cyber and security C-suite level roles. We do see a great variance, to your point, Gwen, both in terms of prevalence of women as well as women of color in these particular roles. And the CIO leads the way. To your point, we see quite a few less. In other areas, cyber is actually another one that I think is on the higher end of it. And what we also see is a big difference between Fortune 500s versus S&P 500s versus Russell 3000 and private. And we have a much lower representation of women across all of these roles, with an exception of chief digital officers on the private side. And so there is a quite a varied level of diversity of women in these types of roles, by type of role, by the size of the company, by whether it's a private or a public company. And that tells us that there is no common thread yet in terms of having women advance. Why is that? There is a variety of factors. I think it has to do with organizational focus first and foremost. And one of the big highlights that the report is going to make in terms of recommendations is that organizations need to be intentional, and their sponsorship is required at the CEO and executive level for these types of roles to actually seek out qualified women leaders to fill them. There are also barriers, that affect women in all types of roles, not in tech, but they may be pronounced, related to societal biases, related to stigma associated with women in technical fields, and that, to Velma's point, starts very early, right? It starts in school, it starts in college. We see more women entering other science fields in college than technology, data analytics, and computer science. So if we don't go back and correct some of these challenges early in the pipeline, we have less capable women who can progress through the ranks. And then we have challenges with women as they advance in these types of roles. We see a lot more turnover, right? So the promotion rates are lower for women than men as they advance in technical tracks. And also we see more women leaving some of these tracks and going into other types of roles. So the intentionality is key to really addressing this across the full spectrum, right? From early career, to mid-career to later. And we need women, role models and mentors to help other women see this as possible.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I just wanted to add that when we think about the pipeline, the importance we've learned over time that we have to go earlier and earlier in the pipeline to start getting women and young girls ready as early as 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, that they need to really see themselves as problem solvers. So I think the way we talk about this is very important, that we allow young women to see themselves as people who can create a big difference. And when you see a child or someone excited about an issue, encourage them to help solve that issue, because that sets an expectation that you can do it. So I think the way we talk to children and young women is really important, starting at an early age. And I think we have to also get parents and community members involved. And so many parents, I read a report, are afraid of entering the STEM arena with their children because they think it's just too hard and they need to be a geek, and it's not true. I mean, I come from an island of 250 people and got a PhD in engineering, and my parents did not have technical degrees. And so what happened was they talked to me in a way that said, we expect you to do well. And we love the fact that you're excited about solving this problem. And so they surrounded me with resources and I got a lot of exposure. So I think starting at an early age, there was always this expectation that you will do well and you will solve problems. So we have to attack it, I think, at early age, and we have to think about the entire ecosystem and how does everybody play a role in helping to encourage people and shepherd them through the entire pipeline.
Absolutely. And that actually leads us into, I think, what the next question is kind of what do those pathways look like? To your point, Velma and Gina, is people are often like, it's too hard, there's too many degrees or certificates, or I have to be a geek. So, and we look at, women occupying less than 25% of these roles. And then of course, when we look at the intersectionalities, right? 83% of people holding those roles are white, right? And the diversity, we know that's important. We hear it, we talk about it. But what do the pathways look like? And maybe Mythbuster, tell us a little bit about how it looks like to become, the PhD in engineering, the chief information officer, the CISO. What does that look like?
So I'll start by saying, I would like us to recognize, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, Gina referenced that there are some growing fields that create opportunity for women. Cyber is huge. In the cyber field, women only represent 24% of the roles, but we cannot fill the void, the gap, in terms of the opportunities that are there. And so employers are starting to recognize that everyone needs to have cyber professionals throughout the entire enterprise. And so there has to be a focus there. And what's neat about that is you don't have to have a bachelor's degree in computer science in order to do well and to rise in this field. There are a number of certificates, a number of ways that you can enter into the cyber career field, and it opens up a whole number of paths to you. There isn't just one. So I wanted to say that that's an area. And I think digital creates another, that digital transformations now, people are starting to realize how important it is to make sure that they have professionals in their organization that really are digital savvy. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, but there's no one path, but we have to really get women to be exposed to these opportunities early. And in my particular case, I just love solving problems throughout ever since I was a small child. And that's what really drove me throughout my career to get bachelor's, master's, and a PhD in engineering, was because I wanted to solve that next big problem. So sometimes I think we don't emphasize enough that it's the excitement and the passion around a particular set of problems or opportunities that we can leverage that to get people interested and say, well, you know what, in order for you to, we expect you to solve that problem, but in order for you to do that, you're going to need to use these tools. And those tools look like some of the, triple integration that maybe we don't want to deal with. But I think that those are the kinds of conversations we need to have with folks at an early age to kind of move them throughout this pipeline.
What about you, and what about your pathway? What other, tips and advices along the way?
It's interesting listening to Velma. I think there are pathways in some areas that are more established, to Velma's point, and other areas are emerging, right, and expanding. And so we think about the traditional technology pathway, and a lot of people who've come through that come from technology backgrounds. But then as we think about roles like, cyber roles that Velma described, the chief digital officers, chief data analytics officers, chief data scientists, these roles didn't exist 10 years ago in many companies. These are emerging fields. When I think of my own path, I didn't aspire to be a chief analytics officer or chief data officer. When I started in this field of work, those roles didn't exist, right? They didn't really exist, especially not at an enterprise level. And we were typically embedded in different parts of the company doing this type of work. And so the evolution that has occurred in the past 10, 15 years, where the companies have elevated these roles to the C-suite, recognizing the importance of intelligence, AI, cyber, digital has emerged, and the post-pandemic world has taken, even a broader and more important emphasis. These roles are new. Companies don't always define them in the same ways from, company to company or industry to industry. And as a result, those of us who lead in these roles come from a variety of backgrounds. Some come through the technology track and transition into these roles. Others, may come from the business side. And, Wilma hit on something that's very important. Everyone in these roles is a problem solver by heart, right? We're all problem solvers. And, digital roles have evolved and have taken on a whole, new scope and much broader scope than, what they may have looked like 10 years ago. So digital leaders, it's an acquired skill set. There are programs now in business schools that, orient towards some of these areas, but these programs are new. They're creating future leaders. Today's leaders have done a lot of learn by experience, I think, and that's what we need to enable women to do, experience different aspects so they can forge their own pathway, because there is no one way to get into any of these fields.
I think that's an important point about forging. We did a paper on women in C-suite and pathways. What we talked about was, being opportunistic. There's no one way to do this, right?
That's right.
And that problem solving. I want to touch a little bit before we sort of move on to our next question, a bit on kind of what's happening with women of color in this space. Is it due to just sort of some of the typical barriers? Is it due to some of the stigma? They're much less, as they often are in C-suite positions, unfortunately. But what do we think is happening there?
Well, as someone who, frankly, as a tech leader my entire life, these barriers have been ones that I've faced, and I've been fortunate that I've had advocates and sponsors and parents and opportunity, and all those barriers that you typically hear about, they're still there. And so it becomes even more acute if you actually you are a woman of color, because there's an expectation that that maybe you shouldn't be there, you don't belong. And it's kind of funny when you talk to people about the language that people use to describe. I listen when corporate leaders say, we really need more focus on diversity. And I always say, for what? You need to answer that question. You need to articulate the value of diverse talent. Why are you talking about diversity without marrying it with talent? No one wants diversity for diversity's sake. We want diverse talent. And so sometimes the way people use language, there's a sense of letting you know that you don't really belong here. And so you're always fighting to, and in many cases, just to prove that you have a right to be there. And in some cases, you see these women are overqualified, always getting the extra technical degree in order to prove that they can do something, versus having an expectation that you're diverse talent and you're going to do well. So I think we still have a lot of issues that need to get addressed at the C-suite level, and especially at the top of the chain, where there needs to be a real focus on being intentional. As Gina said early, be intentional about your language and your intent, and be clear that you have a huge problem. We're all problem solvers. So we start with, what's the problem we have? We have a problem in the sense that we really need to increase our market penetration. We need to reduce our costs. We need to address our cyber challenges. We need a digital transformation strategy. Where are we going to get this talent to do it? And at this point, that's where you start to say, let's go out and get this diverse talent. And by the way, let's be more creative about how we're doing it. Let's not go to all of the same places to find this talent. I have experienced as a science and technology leader that sometimes some of the best hires for some of the tech challenges were people with a degree in political science, maybe not sometimes the ones with the engineering degree. So there is a recognition now that you can actually recruit from different disciplines in order to solve these problems. And I think it's still a slow movement where companies are waking up to that, but it's important because we've got a gap to fill in terms of solving a lot of these problems. So I think it's bottoms up and tops down from the companies, that the leadership have to be clear about their expectation. And I think they have to look for conscious and unconscious bias in their systems, in their hiring practices, and what are they really doing? You need to find those barriers and eliminate them. And you need to be clear that that's your expectation. You have to demonstrate that you're serious about it. And I think that we talked about earlier, Gina and I, earlier in the pipeline, we've got to get more women and minorities in the pipeline and get them excited about solving problems, but making sure that we're bringing resources, exposure, that we're helping parents figure out, what are my resources? Maybe online. I don't have to be a geek to do this, but we've got some resources.
So Gina, I'm going to turn it over to you because this is a great time with Velma's, what companies and organizations can do to bring in this diverse talent. I'd love to hear your recommendations.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I will give a shout out to Bristol Myers Squibb. I am, recent joiner, and one of the things I was thrilled to learn when I came on board is we have a company-wide commitment to diversity, and that the intentionality we talked about earlier is evident. The team I joined, and this is the team that does data and analytics across the company. 60% of our executives within our team are women. More than half are diverse women. And this is not something I can take credit for. This is something that I'm encouraging as the result of thoughtful and intentional leadership. And I'm just so proud of what's been done. And it's been done through a series of very pragmatic things. All the items Vilma highlighted, it starts with recruitment and how and where we recruit. We do a lot of work around development programs. So we bring people in through rotational programs from across the company. We have early career development programs that enable us to bring this talent in and train them. They don't have to come with a PhD to develop in this space. We obviously sponsor continued education. We also do a lot around ensuring we mitigate bias during the hiring process. And we look at how we help people grow and what opportunities they have. And I know it's not unique just to my space at Bristol Myers, but it's about embedding these principles across every part of the company. Similarly, on the technology side, I know we have a female leader who is leading our cyber efforts and a number of other things. And so it manifests when you are actually focused on this as part of what you do as a leadership team. I think it manifests, and it's very important because that's the only way you actually support the true diversity, which results in diversity of thought, diversity of capabilities, and ultimately translates into business impact. When you have a diverse, thriving team, you see results that translate into how your business performs and how you serve your patients and customers.
Absolutely. No, I love that, and I welcome to Bristol Myers Squibb. That sounds fantastic. And we're going to end sort of with two things. The first thing is to your points, and thank you for the work from as well. And in the cybersecurity space, the Women Business Collaborative is building a collaborative of women cyber governance specialists, which are C-suite executives and board members. And we are recruiting applicants and providing that certification and training and talking about those pathways and who's leading at places like Bristol Myers Squibb and others. So that's all we have time for today. So thank you, Velma. Thank you, Gina, for your insights today.
Thank you, Gwen.
Please visit the WBC website on November 15th to see this report, and also visit the WCGC, the Women's Cyber Governance site. If you're a C-suite leader or board executive focused on cybersecurity, apply and see if you can join our cohort of women. And we invite you to wbcollaborative.org to learn more about all of our initiatives, which are aimed at increasing women in the C-suite and boardroom, addressing the underrepresentation of women in areas like technology, and to advance a pipeline of women leaders that are going to bring gender, pay parity, diversity, equity, inclusion to the business landscape. Join us weekly to keep up to date in our progress, the movement for gender parity, and follow us at wbcollaborative.org on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Velma, and have a wonderful Thursday.
Thank you.